Okay, I probably am pretty sure absolutely no one is listening at the moment. Um, this is my first time streaming anything of any kind, so I'm going to show you how to create some microservices really quickly. Um, should be pretty fun. It's actually really super easy with Java and Spring, so that's what we're going to start with. I'm going to show you how to just get a Spring Boot application on its feet. It'll be pretty quick. So we'll just start with IntelliJ, which of course I have not opened. And I'll start a new project because I've got a couple of things going on. I don't want to just jump you into the middle of the process in case you actually want to know how to do microservices. Of course, that's assuming anybody's logged in at all. And another problem is I don't actually have a second monitor. So I'm going to be jumping back and forth. Probably you'll be staring into infinity a couple of times while I get used to this and get used to streaming and such. Hopefully you can hear me just fine as well. We're going to go ahead and make a new project. We're going to make a Maven project. I don't think I need an archetype. I've never had any good luck getting these archetypes to work anyway. So we're going to make a Java 8 application. We're going to go ahead and run this. Let's see, what can I do? We'll go with my job, why not? org.catalyst IT services, and my artifact ID will be microservices, and our application will be, I don't know, let's do a book service. And this will be our book microservice. We'll go ahead and create a new project here. Okay, so it goes ahead and gets it set up here. We've got our source, we've got our Java directories and everything. We're going to go ahead and enable auto import. That'll be fine. And the easiest way to get these started is just to grab the block of code it gives you. It's pretty easy. So pop that in there. It's going to go ahead and try to resolve that dependency, which it should be able to do. And what we're going to do is we're going to use starters. And what starters do, it allows us to minimize the amount of code I actually have to write. So there we go. It found it. Everything's fine. We have starter web. I actually want to take a look at the different types of starters, because what these do is just add components to my program that I would normally have to configure and install myself. So what I'm going to do is look very carefully into this page that is easily written but not for idiots like me, building an application with Spring Boot. So what I'm looking for is a set of Spring Boot dependencies. And of course I'm going through everything you'd ever want to know. This website is really well built. Just reading through this getting started guide is a really good tip if you never used Spring Boot before, if you never used Spring or Java before. Understanding these stuff is pretty useful. So we're going to go ahead and look for Spring Boot starters. I'm looking for a list. Spring Boot reference, starters. Who knows? Maybe I'll find something useful. Official starter name. Here we go. This is what I'm looking for. So by default, it started me with Spring Boot Starter Web. And Web gives me basically everything from Web MVC, which is super useful. But I want to go a little bit further. What I want to do is I want to build an entity with a JPA, and I want a RESTful service to be built around that. And that's really quite easy to do. So I'm going to go ahead and use the HATEOAS RESTful service. This is going to automatically create my RESTful service based on whatever entities I have in place. I won't have to build any of the endpoints or anything that drive that. There's a lot of details in that, and I don't want to deal with any of them. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in the Spring Starter Data JPA. So let's go ahead and bring those in right now. I want that, and I want... Oh, come on, you can do it. Spring Data HATEOAS. Hypermedia RESTful endpoints is what that gives me, and it gives it to me pretty cheaply. So we get those two things in there, and basically my application is going to get started pretty quickly, but I do need an entry point. So, and of course, I'm going to cheat because, of course, I have done all of this, and it's a little bit fun, more fun to look like I know what I'm doing. New window. So I need a main application, and I'm just trying to remember what this looked like. And so we're going to make an entry point in our application, just a simple Java class, nothing special. I like to call it Spring Configuration because it's going to be how I define everything that's going into my application. And so we're going to declare this a Spring Boot application. That gives me all the automation that I would want to get this program on its feet and executing. And I'm sure I'm missing something. Let's see. Oh, and I don't need that one. So Spring Boot application, I have a main entry point, and this is only for when this application is running on its own. I could just as easily add Spring Starter Jetty into this, and it would instead start with a Jetty instance and boot from that. I didn't actually master that, though. I'm missing a little detail. We'll go ahead and get that all in there, but I believe HATEOAS already adds that. Let's go ahead and take a look at what HATEOAS adds for me. We get the starter web for free, and Spring and Chlor, Spring HATEOAS. Web is likely going to give me a Tomcat, which it does here, which will let me just deploy this into any WAR file that I want. Let's go ahead and just kind of get this going here. So I'm going to create a run configuration, and let's see what happens. It's either going to work or it's going to burst into fire. Usually it bursts into fire. I don't have any profiles. We'll make this really easy. Run service. Alright. Most interesting things will be the log file because... And installing, build success, nothing to compile, everything's complete. Must not have found anything to actually do because I don't have any entities. And I built my jar and everything's happy. Actually, maybe I didn't tell it to start correctly. Let's go take a look at this getting started guide. I may need to give it a specific run command to get it to execute everything I would expect it to see. Curl localhost. Let's see, Maven package, Maven jar, target. Yeah, I can just run it from that. But what I really want to do, we'll go ahead and put Jetty in there. One thing that I'm going to try to do is avoid the use of control click. I'm going to try to hit control B whenever I want to click into something, and then control alt left when I want to go back and forth. That way you guys looking at my little keyboard Jetty, I better put it somewhere useful, keyboard Jedi, will know what I'm doing without having to guess different combinations with the keyboard and mouse. I'm trying to make it helpful to you. If you got any other suggestions for me, let me know. Of course, I won't be able to read the chat because I am streaming, and again, my home setup only has a single monitor, and it's not a very good one. That's why you're at 720p and not 1080p. I didn't want you to have odd aspect stretching and such. So let's give this a shot and see what happens. It's already running. Nope, it's not. Just sitting there. Not sure what to do with this little guy yet. Well, that's not nice. Well, at least it's compiling correctly. It's not compiling the way I'm hoping it will do, but let's take a look at why that might be. My Spring configuration, I'm looking at the one that worked. Oh, yeah. I don't have a build. Duh. Let's go ahead and bring this guy in here so that we can actually have Maven do something, which is not only compile and run the test, but execute my... Come on, execute. There we go. No, it didn't do anything. I wanted to execute my jar as well. So it built it. Maven install, blah, blah, blah. Build success. I must have a lifecycle, clean, test, install. I guess I just have to do, maybe it's just Spring Boot. Yeah, that would make sense. Spring Boot run. That makes more sense. Let's go ahead and run that. Alright, there we go. Things are starting to boot up. Of course, couldn't find anything. Your application is unlikely to start due to a computer scanner. Unlikely to start. Well, that's not nice. Oh, man. Repository REST MVC configuration acting like it does not exist. Well, could be because I don't have any. Could be a couple things. One, I don't have a lot of. I don't have any actual repositories and or entities, so I'm going to go ahead and create those in a second. The second reason it might not be starting is a lot of times when you just kind of go by faith and cross your fingers without any specific versioning, what will happen is it will add into your project all sorts of horrible things that don't necessarily line up with each other. So here we go. I see one here. We have Data Commons 1.9.3 and JPA 1.7.3. That might actually be good. I don't remember the specific versions of that. At least we're getting a bunch of Spring Framework stuff that I was expecting. But this data thing kind of bothers me. So what I'm going to want to do is try to be more specific. And wow, how do I give it actual versions? Let's steal some properties. Maven properties help me do cool things like refer to properties. If I can remember it. Spring Boot version. We'll go ahead and add these to my Spring Boot stuff. Another thing I noticed is Spring Starter Data REST and Spring Starter Web are on my other ones. No, I just did Jetty. Okay. Stick with Jetty. Like everything Maven, the first start is always the most painful while you're trying to figure out exactly what you need. I wonder if this is the same thing. No, it is not. I copied it. So, hopefully that is going to resolve some of the issues. It still bothers me. I don't like a Commons library that's higher version than the rest of the library. That makes me really nervous. What I can do to try to kind of force that, and it may be that it doesn't actually exist, is I can say Spring Data JPA and then set it to version 1.9.3.release and see what happens. Now this doesn't always work, right? There may be a reason the Commons is at 1.9 and the rest of it is 1.7. Most likely incompatibilities. We can take a look at, it doesn't look like it's going to work. So we can take a look at the Spring Data REST here, and I thought I would use Control B. Let's take a look. Spring Data. And like all programming, it's just a lot of discovery. I apologize if I don't know if I don't look like what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing, but it's true, I don't. Programming is all about trying to find solutions. Here's the right one. Nope. I gotta try to use these keyboard commands for your benefit. Tomcat starter. You know, I'm not seeing where the Spring data is actually injected. How weird. I must just be blind. Well, let's see what happens when I add an entity and a repository. I like to put these in different packages, so I'll have an entity package. Of course, spelled correctly would be nice. Entity. And we'll create another package called repository. If you've never used these before, these are really handy. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to define a book. I'm going to declare this to be an entity from Java X persistence. Always better to use the interfaces rather than the implementation. You're in big trouble if you don't, particularly with Spring and Java. Everything's got to be conventions, everything, or everything will explode. So we're going to go ahead and create a private long ID and a private string, I don't know, title, private date, let's see, first release. Heck, I might have a set of releases in a little bit, but who knows what I want to do here. In any kind of Hibernate entity, I want to give it some details. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing, man. Or I just haven't clicked it in a while. No, it is ID. That is so annoying. So we'll just leave it that way and let it figure itself out. And then I wanted this to be a generated value for sure. There we go. Now it gets it. Must not have indexed everything. This is just going to be a basic field, and this is going to be whatever. Go ahead and make some setters and getters. Always handy with Alt Insert. Now I have a basic entity and I need a repository for that entity, so I'll create a book repository. And what this does is basically automate the persisting and the saving of this entity in different cool ways. So this is actually going to be an interface. I'm going to declare this an interface. I'm going to extend the I think I'm going to extend the JPA repository. Old space. I guess I can have proper syntax. I bet it'll help me then. Let's see. So this is going to be a book, and its ID is a long. I'll go ahead and import that class from entity, but I want to make sure that's what okay, so T is my entity, and ID is the type of entity, which is needs to be serializable, which it is. It's really all I need to do to support a large number of functionality. This extends paging and sorting. Paging and sorting extends a CRUD repository. I can get fancier if I wanted to do. I can extend a criteria or specification repository or something like that. It allows me to write specifications and criteria, and that gets me to really drill down into very specific queries to the database. In my case, we're going to be super simple. Remember, I want to make a microservice. I want to make it really fast. Obviously, I'm not making it very fast on camera, but you know, live, nothing ever goes right, and I never remember anything when I'm talking at the same time. So we have a book repository. We have a book. Let's go ahead and start our program again and see what happens. I'm going to probably have to dig through why those errors happened, of course. Oh. So now it hates my version. Well, it didn't derive the version, so I have palm errors now. Why would one work and the other not? That just seems annoying. Designed to bother me. Jetty data rest JPA 1.2.4. Oh, I bet I know why. Or maybe I don't. My parents Well, my parents should work that way as well. So I got JPA, breast, and jetty. I know, so which of these things is not written like the other? Maybe I can't do the version in there. Oh, that's probably it. I bet it's not doing any string replacement this far down. I bet they even suggest putting the properties underneath the parent to prevent that kind of logical thinking to begin with. But let's see what happens. Who knows? Must have been it. Sometimes you win some, sometimes you don't. Your application context is unlikely to start due to a component scan of the default. Component scan of the default. And component scan is automatically enabled when you annotate your configuration with Spring Boot. I'm giving it the my own class name. Well, let's read the log. So your application context is unlikely to start due to a component scan of the default package. Oh, that makes absolute sense. Since I'm an idiot and I'm doing this live, I did not put my application where I said I would put my application, which is into this package. So let's go ahead and add this package and move everything into it. Move everything. Move everything. Oh, you know. Refactor, move everything. Cool. Now that'll work a lot better. So let's run this. Alright, another error, but that's not a big deal. I'm okay with that. Now, factory data source driver for data types done. So now I don't have a database, but it did try to instantiate everything. So it tried to create everything I needed, my entities, and connect them all up. But it can't do it from a vacuum. It needs some kind of database or some sort of bean that describes where the data is supposed to sit. But fortunately, Spring Boot is also smart enough to know that if I've only put a in-memory database, then that's what I want it to use. So if there's no data source found, but it could find drivers, it's going to create the data source. It's going to use default whatever it needs to, and it's going to go to town from there. So as soon as I put this into my class path, everything's going to work, you know, in theory. Alright, so everything's starting up now. You can see Hibernate initializing here. You can see HATEOAS OAS starting up. So I have my endpoints I would expect to see. And I think that everything started up. So it says my JVM is up, Jetty is started, and I now can connect to this. So let's go ahead and connect to this and see what happens. And what it says is, on the root, I have the following links available to me. Remember, this is all hypermedia links. I can go to /books, it even gives me the URL down here, and expect to see a list of books. And there are none, but it tells me that I have paging, I have links, and it tells me what it can support. It can support paging, sizing, and sorting. So what we want to do is probably go and insert a book. A book is very simple, the way we defined it. Let's go ahead and close this. And actually, before I do that, before we start using that service and kind of showing what it does, I want to add one more thing to this that just helps me, helps my sanity. We're going to add an application.properties file. This is a special file that's in place for Spring App, or Spring Boot. I apologize. It lets me define certain things that Spring Boot is gonna need. Now the assumption is that when Spring JPA starts up, it creates a Hibernate backend, and it initializes itself with its own Hibernate properties, and you don't get any hook into that unless you create one. And I'm sorry, not if you create one, but if you tell Spring Boot that you would like to adjust some of those properties, you can. And this is one of them: spring.jpa.showSQL. Normally this would be in your Hibernate properties. We're going to put it right in here in the application properties. I'm switching back and forth from an application. I know, not very good showing you the process of a programmer, which is fail, 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 fail. Ooh, I got a success. But this is live. I guess I should show the fail, fail, fail methodology of programming. That's more likely what you're going to run into when you're actually doing this stuff. So with show SQL on, and I restart this, remember, don't click this multiple times if you have multiple servers running at the same time. They will, of course, fail spectacularly. Okay, Hibernate starts up, and what I should see, which I don't see but wanted to see, is the, oh, there it is there. So it's going to show me the SQL that it used to create a book. In this case, a book is a ID with a big int that has a sequence attached to it. We have first release. It changes that camel case to lower underscore, which is a timestamp, and then a title. Now, I didn't give it any properties. I didn't give it any JSR 303 validators. I didn't give it any clues to help it pick a better underlying system. So if I said something like size, and I give it a value, so we say, you know what, this title can be a maximum of 30 characters. And if I said, actually I can't really say much on a date except for I can make sure it's in the future or before a certain time. But let's give it a size with a max of 30. We can even control the generated value, I believe. Strategy, sequence table, we'll just leave it where it is. I thought I could give it the first value, but since this is an abstract object relational mapping, I can't get super specific to where I could, like if I'm building an Oracle table, but I can get pretty close, just not super close to the database. JPA 2.0 added a lot of stuff I really like, but it's still not perfect. If you're going to build object relational mapping, you're really going to have to go with it. You don't get the flexibility you get with straight SQL, although you could fake it and do it anyway. It makes testing a lot harder. You want all of your entities to be able to be created and work correctly in an in-memory database, so you can run your unit tests that much more efficiently. So let's go ahead and see how these changes. I put the size there. Remember, size max 30, and we'll see how that changed the SQL. Obviously, expect it to say varchar 30. But we'll see what happens. You never know. You can do it. There it is. So let's take a look at our log message here. It says title is varchar 30. So we can control that with some validators. Now, what's really nice about this is that if I gave it a title that was more than 30 in the RESTful service, it will throw me an exception because I violated that constraint. Not just at the database level. The database won't puke at me, but it'll actually be the validators that happen as the request goes into the RESTful controller. And the RESTful controller, we're all started up, remember, by HATEOAS. And I get a lot of stuff for free. I can do, I can head, get, post, I can do searches, paging, sorting, whatever I want to do. It gives me a lot of methods to do that. Now, I haven't explored all the little nitty-gritty details of some of these methods, but they're pretty interesting, and there's a lot of discovery with HATEOAS. So I can do ALPS here, and I can get a list of everything going on here. I can even do ALPS books and just keep digging in to understand exactly, well, what is a book? It'll tell me. I haven't run into a whole lot of things that use ALPS, but maybe I'm just repressed and not looking enough on the internet for things. So that is the fastest, simplest way that I know, other than using Node, to create a Java-based Spring Boot microservice. Now this can be deployed to Tomcat or into the cloud. You could make dozens of these, each with a single entity and a single repository doing your single task. It's actually really quite easy. I can just add different relationships here and it'll start up everything. And what's interesting with HATEOAS is HATEOAS. I'm going to say it wrong every time. I know it's known as a reader. I don't do good pronouncing things on live or anywhere. So we're going to add chapters to our book. We're going to create a relationship. This is just as an example to try to see how this how relational entities map in HATEOAS or OAS, and we'll see how things go. So we're gonna go ahead and create a ID, because really when you're doing OAS, you really want to have everything have an ID. Even though my chapter is identity is based on the book it's in, I don't really want that to be in the database represented that way. I'm going to create a chapter. It'll have its own ID, and then I'm going to associate a book to it. And I can create a unique an index and a unique key on that. Let's say book, and another identity is a private integer chapter. Okay, and these will be, actually this is a shoot. I never get these right. Many to one. One to many is a set. Okay, so I always get these wrong. One to many. All right. So we're gonna make this a one to many. I don't think I need to put a. Well, I guess I do. I need a private set of chapter. Did I call it chapters for some reason? Let's fix that right now. Chapter. Go back to book. Chapters. There we go. That makes more sense. We're going to do a one to many. Target mapped by I think that's how that all works. That seems familiar. And we'll see what happens. Never know until you try. So we got a one to many map by book. I really want this lazy instantiated. Let's see. I guess it doesn't really matter. When you're using HATEOAS, you kind of do whatever the heck it wants you to do. You don't have full control over what's fetched and what's not, what's available and what's not. We're going to go ahead and see what happens here. Another thing that's a little bit annoying in my opinion is that my DAO objects, my data access objects, what actually gets sent back in JSON is going to be the representation of this entity. And that has some ramifications, particularly with circular logic. I'm going to go ahead and JSON ignore. I don't remember how I solved some of it. There was a definite way to do it. So I'll have to remember what that was. So let's go ahead and create something. See, this is basic, and let's put some kind of content. And we'll say this is a max of 1,000. It'll make sure it doesn't create it with a varchar of 255. I definitely want more than that. I can make this 5,000. Let's go with 5,000. That seems like a good paragraph block. Now chapters probably could be a lot longer, so I may want to put this into even more discrete pieces, paragraphs perhaps, but let's just start with that. And of course, let's go ahead and give a chapter a title as well. let's see. Index. I think I have to give it indices. Oh, maybe not. Maybe I say it here. No, name. I had this down at one point, and of course I'm going to look everywhere, but where I actually need to be... we'll add indexing later. I can give that a unique key, which is actually really handy. Let's go with what we've got for now. I need setters and getters. Forget those, and nothing ever works. We're going to need a repository specifically for chapters. And yes, you have to have a repository for chapters when you're using this system. You can't have a book that just also returns chapters. HATEOAS is all about hypermedia and hyperinformation, so that you're not repeating anything. Even though we know this is a one-to-one, more or less. The chapters aren't going to be in multiple books, for instance. The automation demands it, so that's what you should do. Interface for everything, or a repository for everything, and RESTful endpoints for everything, particularly these types of relationships. We're going to go ahead and extend JPA repository. This is for a chapter. It's got a long ID. Import the class. Okay, let's go ahead and see what this does. Who knows if it's even going to work. And I don't like getting coding very far before I test it. One thing I'm not doing right now is writing the unit tests. That's a big mistake. I should be writing the unit test for everything I succeed in doing. But this is, like I said, my first live stream. I'd like to keep it that way, keep it simple if I could. My entity manager. Unable to build Hibernate section factory. Well, that's not nice. Is there any reason, special reason why not? Because you were working a second ago. Enable debugs, application startup, entry manager factory, class path, Hibernate JPA auto configure invocation failed, necessary persistence expression, unable to build Hibernate session factory. Well, maybe the end of the line will tell me why it couldn't build. No identifier specified for entity chapter. Aha! Get deep enough, you will eventually find what you're looking for. So we'll give it ID, we'll give it a generated value. Try it again. Alright, I expect to see two create statements generated from this. And it looks like I do. And then I have a foreign key relationship created as well. So my chapter has a big int that's generated. I have a chapter integer. I have a content with a varchar 500. I have a title with a varchar 255. And I have a book ID with a big int that's going to point to the primary key over here in book. So it looks like everything's pretty much working. Now when I look at this service, I should now see two endpoints, one for books and one for chapters, and that's great news. So now what we want to do is kind of start playing with these services and seeing what they actually do. And you can see I selected chapters there, so it's showing me the SQL for that. What to show in a webcast? What would be interesting to any of you? Now, if you're typing anything in the chat window, I can't see a thing because I don't have multiple monitors if you're just joining me. Also, you're viewing it in 720p because I have a cheap monitor. I didn't want to ruin your aspect ratio by having this not 16:9 monitor resizing on your screens in weird ways. Another thing that I'm doing is trying to avoid using Control-Click for things because you obviously can't see Control-Click. I'm trying to click on things and then Control-B, or using the back and forth buttons with Control-Alt-Left and right. You can see them on this keyboard jetty when I'm doing anything fancy like search everywhere, Control-Shift-O, or open file, Control-Shift-N. So I'm not doing any magic. What was I going to do? All right, we want to test the rest. So what I want to find here is, this is, IntelliJ comes with a RESTful tester, but in my opinion, it's really, really bad. I have not seen anything I really like out of this thing yet. It does remember what you do, but it's, again, it's not really very exciting to use. There's some better tools out there. Another thing I'm going to need to do is make sure I use the content type, because, let's see if it's going to help me, because I don't really want XML. I guess what I want is accept. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Alright, once I've added this request, we're going to do a post. We're going to add some text. Open this up and we'll do title, what about Bob, simple little JSON. We'll have to put the content type here as application. I'm doing this wrong, I know I am. There's never anything that goes well the first time. Unexpected character T was a double quote to start field name, blah 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 blah. Expecting double quote to start field name. Oh, fine, it's not perfect JSON. Perfect JSON coming up. Response was empty, but let's take a look at our response headers. Our response headers will contain the location of the object that I just created. In this case, it's /1. So let's take a look at the get statement for that book that we just created. So it tells us the title is What About Bob? The first release is null because I didn't give it one and I didn't tell it was required. And then I get a couple of links. I have one link, I have two links. I have self, which is just this particular one, and then I have a link to chapters. So if I type 1/chapters, what it's going to give me is a list of all the chapters that this book contains. Now I know it doesn't contain any, which is fine by me, because we're going to go and create some chapters right now, and we're going to put that on the chapters pinpoint. We'll leave all that, and a chapter needs a book. And what's interesting about these links is what I have to do is I put the actual URL of that book, and what HATEOAS is going to do is go and get that book. So there's a couple of things I said this book had to have. I will give it a chapter 2. I will give it a title of The Beginning. Spelled probably bad. Beginning. I don't care. And we'll give it some content of foobar. Of course, proper. Alright, let's give that a shot, see what happens. It didn't work the first time I did this when I was just testing on my own, but we'll see what happens today. So no mapping due to end of input. So next exception, could not read JSON. So my JSON didn't look good. No mapping due to end of input. Didn't like it. So I typed something in wrong. Let's try to figure out what that could be. I thought it looked good. What am I doing? Book, chapter, title, beginning. Let's just take a look at the beginning. Chapter 2. You know, I don't understand why that would not like me. It'd be a different error if that was mapped wrong. It would be... How very odd. Of course, nobody's on chat to save me, so I'll just have to figure out why it doesn't like me. Oops. Well, I guess we can look at the exception. Unaffected character. Nope, that was the old one. This is the new one. Could not read JSON. No content to map due to end of input. So it was trying to map something it thought it needed, but it didn't have. I have an ID, which I don't need. I want it to generate that. I have a book, I have a chapter, I have a title, and I have content. REST client. Let's hit it again just for fun. Due to end of content. Wow. Let's experiment and not give it a book just in case this is the problem. No, that is not the problem. So it's going to be something, oh gosh, it better not have been that. I would have been very upset. Didn't click text. Oh, of course, why not? That of course is why it was wrong. So now if I go to my get and I take a look at this guy. Empty. I'm going to see that I'm chapter 2, the beginning. My content is foobar, and it gives me both a link to myself and to the book. So if I type book and hit play, I should see that book. What about Bob? Now what's also interesting, if I go to books and I go to 1 and I go to chapters, I'm going to see a list of the chapters, and I only have 1 in my list, and it is 2. So that's kind of hypermedia in a gist. You can make much more complicated relationships. You can do whatever you want, and it will just work. Now, one thing I wanted to show, we're going to assume you have no questions because I can't read them. We'll correct that over time. One thing I wanted to do was show how the auditing worked. I don't know if you've used Hibernate auditing, but it's kind of cool. I can make sure that no edit or delete ever actually removes anything ever. I can use audit tables. And I find these really cool. JPA. Enable JPA auditing. And that's really all I do, except I've got to add audited and audited to my classes. Now, I have audit tables created. So every edit, every create, every delete is actually going to leave a trail of versions around. Now, the main table, the main chapters table and the main books table will absolutely be the current version of whatever you're looking at. But if you wanted to, you can go through the audit table and go through the revision history. And what's useful about that is you could have an audit reader that will go and give you a version of any object or even any list of objects, how it looked at a particular time. So if you want to go look at what kind of books did we have a month ago, or who made this edit, you can go find that out. Now the who, you actually have to create an audit. An audit object, so you can go and populate your own user into the to the revision info table, and it'll record who and what and anything else you want to store in it. Spring Security comes into play there, but you can see that it created a book and a book audit table, and the book audit table is basically book except with a revision and a revision type, which is the add, the edit, the delete. Whatever it might be. And each of these create the audit tables. Now when I have the many-to-many relationships, this also creates audit tables for all of that. It's all automated. I don't have to do anything. After I put @audited up there on an entity, I can assume I'm going to be able to get to anything. Now, HATEOAS does not allow you to automate the audit reader, which is how you get to the audit data in JPA or Hibernate. But it's good enough. For most users, you probably don't need to dive into your audit tables from a RESTful endpoint. And even if you do, it's really easy just to create another controller that actually is your audit controller for these microservices. Now, this didn't take me long. I've been at this for about an hour, and I was kind of dinking around. If I needed to create 15 of these, I could pretty quickly. Security layer over this wouldn't be too bad once you figure it out for your particular environment. And these microservices are ready to deploy. I don't have to do pretty much anything else at this point. Obviously, clients will all want different details, different filtering, different validation. different ways to express that validation. And you can do that all with Spring. This is anything that you implement in Spring Boot, anything that you take over and do yourself, Spring Boot will allow you to do that and not trip over itself while you're implementing a different data source or implementing a different controller for your repository. It's really good at that stuff. So that is my presentation, I guess, on Spring Boot and microservices for at least Spring and Java. There's a lot of other things we can build. Obviously, when we say microservices, I can build this from minimalistic Node.js up to a C#, really. I mean, I guess C# is actually pretty minimalistic. I don't have too much experience with it. Java is actually probably the heaviest. Spring Boot just makes it easier. And a lot of companies like to use Java building this stuff. Tomcat and the Elastic Beanstalk at Amazon makes it really easy to deploy these services over that way. So I can't see any questions, but I'll be going through the chat for my next presentation. I'm really glad you can join me. I didn't hear anyone subscribe or donate, but you know, I may not actually have anybody looking at me. So thank you very much, everyone. Mouse look. Well, that wasn't what I wanted to do.